welcome to episode 41 of your Bamboo Chalupa digital marketing podcast. My name is Brett Snyder. I'm the founder of Knucklepuck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Hello, hello.
So the majority of our episodes, especially recently, we've noticed that we've been focusing on the tactics of actually performing SEO and performing digital marketing. But I know that we have listeners out there that are part of a larger digital marketing team. And so we started to get some questions about how do you actually manage and scale a team of digital marketers that adhere to a lot of the same tactics and strategies that, we espouse on a regular basis here on Bamboo Chalupa. So today we have a very special guest. We actually have Knucklepuck's Director of SEO, Allie Brown, who's going to be here joining us talking about how to build and manage a growing SEO team to continue to adhere to those goals of driving legitimate and measurable business growth. So Allie, we want to thank you for being on the show and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'll give a little bit of a quick background for Allie and then I'll let her kind of keep running with it. But Allie and I actually worked together years ago at my first job, and hers as well, I believe, at SEER Interactive out of Philly. And so we had a chance to, kind of be part of the startup crew on that agency side. We had a chance to work very closely together, not just on, on the projects and the tactics side, but also on a personal level. She's somebody that I've always appreciated her approach to, to this work, her that ongoing thirst for education. And so when I was looking to continue to grow and scale my team, she was one of the first people that I called, one of the kind of integral elements to helping us build the product that Knucklepuck has. And we wanted to bring her on the show today to talk a little bit about what she's put in place that have allowed us to grow. Our team is up into double digits now. We have complementary departments, and a lot of that comes from Allie making sure that she's got a very clear and defined infrastructure that we were able to build on. So Allie, why don't you give us a little bit of more of a personal intro for yourself, and then we can get into how you manage the team here at Knucklepuck.
Sure. So thanks for that intro, Brett. As you mentioned, I did start at SEER Interactive on the agency side, which I highly recommend if there's anyone out there who's listening and deciding whether they want to start an agency or start in-house. I think an agency is kind of like boot camp for SEO. I learned so much in such a short amount of time, and it was just a fantastic way to start my career. While I was there, I realized that I was really passionate about e-commerce and some of our retail clients. So after a little short of 2 years at SEER, I jumped in-house and worked for Anthropologie, so part of Urban Outfitters, Inc., also in Philly. And that was excellent to be able to work in-house at an enterprise level company that was going global and really growing their digital presence. So I've been fortunate to be able to have both the agency experience and the in-house experience. So now coming back here to start this with you is really going full circle. And I have to say it's been really valuable to know what it feels like to be in our clients' shoes.
Well, I want to start the conversation with that in-house agency contrast, because I think especially in SEO, a lot of times we'll have people who their only experience is in the agency world. I know my experience was in freelance and then agency. It's always been on the consulting side.
It's always been on the consulting side, right?
Yeah,
and mine as well.
Never been on the other side of the table as the client. So, Allie, if you could talk to us about what are the differences that you got to see, between agency side and working as part of an in-house team, as part of a larger department, and how did you approach management in those different types of settings?
Absolutely. So the biggest difference that I really experienced in-house is that you have to act as more of a project manager. When you're at an agency, you guys mentioned it, you're more of a consultant. We provide strategic recommendations, we troubleshoot implementations, we help report on the results and so on. But we usually really have to rely on our clients to ultimately push our initiatives through and do so correctly. When you're in-house, at least in my experience, you have to be the one who really takes ownership and pushes that project through. There are a finite number of development resources, and every single team wants a piece of the pie. So when I was in-house, I had to make a lot of business cases and build relationships with the right people to be able to get our SEO requests prioritized in the dev queue. And I leaned on the agencies that we worked with a lot because I was the only SEO in-house. Working on not only their .com, but helping with their .eu site and merging their CCTLDs onto the .com. So there was a large international component. So I managed a number of different agencies and vendors who really, really helped me get through and experience some of the successes that we did.
It's interesting you talk about project management, really right out the gate here. Nate and I actually did an episode on project management a couple of weeks ago, and I know it's something that is really kind of baked into our core fundamentals here at Knucklepuck. A lot of that has kind of been established based on that experience. Can you tell us a little bit about how that translates? Because the principles of project management are great. You can apply them really to almost any work experience, but how do you specifically look at project management from an in-house role and how that allows you to function efficiently in more of an agency capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised by how few agencies do what they said they were going to do when they said they were going to do it. So a lot of it comes to setting clear expectations and then hitting those expectations. So I always strive to under promise and over deliver. I'd rather tell you something's coming at the end of the week, even if I think I can get it to you by the end of the day, because it gives me some wiggle room. And then if I deliver it to you tomorrow instead of on Friday, you're pleasantly surprised, and I get a lot more freedom and flexibility for other things that may come up during my day. So that is just kind of basic, but I feel like it's worth noting because so few people get that right. And just in terms of project management, especially at the enterprise level where I was, you just have to understand that there are so many different priorities that a web and marketing team has. You're part of this larger digital ecosystem, and I think you have to understand that holistic picture. So what I did in-house was really sit in on our dev meetings and figure out what projects are you working on? How can I squeeze some SEO enhancements into those? Sometimes it was hard to get buy-in for something if it was just for SEO's sake. But if I was able to attach it to a larger initiative, we had a lot of success that way. And then by reporting on the results, people started to say, hey, I'm starting to see the impact of all this SEO stuff. And that's how I was able to get buy-in for larger projects. So I think identifying some quick wins so you can really establish trust and establish some strong results under your belt will help you get the momentum that you need to keep that going down the line.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about that because we kind of refer to that as proof of concept, like you would with your minimum viable product. The purpose of that is to get it out there so you can see how the community at large reacts to it. By being able to generate proof of concept early in a project, as much as I hate the cliche going after that low-hanging fruit, it establishes your credibility. It establishes trust in the relationship. And so that way you can start to look at SEO as you said, they have a number of different initiatives ongoing. If we can look at SEO as part of that piece of, that greater digital marketing ecosystem, rather than having it be something where it's just SEO is in a vacuum versus content's in a vacuum and paid is in a vacuum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before going in-house, I didn't fully appreciate sometimes how hard it is to get your initiatives pushed through. I think I used to get pretty easily frustrated if a client wasn't pushing my changes through as quickly as I would have liked. I could see all this opportunity and I just couldn't believe that they were leaving money on the table by not making these changes immediately. But now that I've been in-house, I understand, like you said, the larger ecosystem. So now that I'm back on the agency side, I really just try to let our clients know that we've got their backs and we want to do whatever we can to help them look good, to help establish SEO as a critical marketing channel. And a lot of that, relates to having those discussions on an ongoing basis about, what are your goals for this quarter? What are your expectations that you're being tasked with for the year? How can we help use SEO to complement that to make sure that we're always aligned on what we should be focusing on and how we're measuring success?
In-house, I kind of understand it as more of an advocate role. And on the consulting side, it's almost like you are the army supporting the advocate. It's also to provide ammunition for the advocate to go out into all the different departments and help them sell the case. Whereas when you're in-house, you are part of that kind of battle over resources, and you have to be the advocate for SEO, for PPC, whatever team you're a part of.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it, at least in my experience. And again, this was at the enterprise level. So it may be different if you're, if you don't have brick and mortar or different things like that, where maybe you have more resources that can go to the website. But yeah, that was my experience. And there were many times where my manager would say, you should consider a career in sales because you do more selling than SEO sometimes. So that's really what it takes. And I think that having that insight just helps me understand that the world doesn't revolve around SEO for our clients. It may be the center of my daily focus, but it's not for them. So we need to always put it in the context of the larger organization's goals.
Well, let's follow that theme of specialization and, specialization within the bigger picture understanding. I think on the agency side, where you are specializing in just SEO, when you're building out your team, a lot of times there's a lot of benefit in specializing each team member. You have a link builder, a content writer, a technical specialist. How do you determine the ideal structure of your team now that you're on the agency side? And how do you balance that with, still being able to provide the kind of big picture understanding that your clients will need to sell it to their departments?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I don't know if I have a concrete answer because it's something we're still trying to figure out. But my personal take on it, I believe that everyone should have a strong foundation in SEO before you specialize in a particular skill set. In my experience, the best SEOs I've worked with throughout my career in digital have all been fairly well-rounded. So you need to be able to diagnose a technical problem, effectively communicate it with all the stakeholders, get buy-in for a solution, and then report on the impact, like I said, to keep the momentum going. So I really think you need to understand the basics and know how to actually move the needle before focusing on one particular thing, whether that be technical, content, outreach, etc. So what we did here recently at Knucklepuck, which I found to be a really valuable exercise, is we actually did a strengths finder test. And we said, okay, what is everyone's natural strength? Because someone, may naturally love numbers and love analytics and love technicals. For someone else, content may come much easier. So we were able to identify who excels where and try to make sure that we get them more exposure in that area so that they can take ownership and take on more of a leadership role, help lead some team trainings in that area that they feel really comfortable in. On the flip side, however, we don't want to pigeonhole someone into one particular role. So for example, we have someone on our SEO team who is just a screaming frog whiz, and anytime he gets a problem, he drops everything into Screaming Frog first and runs a crawl. And it's excellent. We loop him into technical audits all the time. He's fantastic with GA and things like that, but we wanted to stretch him a bit out of his comfort zone. So we said, next week, no crawls. And it forced him to get back in touch with more of the basic on-page things. And he was like, wow, there were certain things that I hadn't really looked at in months because I was just going through the motions of running everything through a crawl. So we do try to identify everyone's different strengths, and we try to support those strengths. However, we don't want you to just get complacent and rely only on those. We try to keep everyone sharp and as well-rounded as possible.
That's really interesting that you bring that up in the context of a team. I know that, most of my career I've been working solo. And so I'll go ahead and admit that I've always been very skeptical, almost scoffing of those, workplace personality tests, I would say. I mean, because it's like, oh, you take the test and I already know what I know about myself. But when you put it like that, I really see how that could be really useful in a team context, because even if everyone knows themselves, it's really useful if you could have 4 or 5 people and you have all the same data, all the same book, the same test that everyone's taken, and be able to overlay that and sort of see the whole team as a single picture.
Yeah, I think, I've been a little bit skeptical in the past as well, but what I really liked about this particular exercise and workshop that we went through was that instead of identifying your weaknesses, I feel like throughout your career, you're constantly told you need to improve on X, Y, and Z. Instead, it's that you are naturally good at these things. If we can find ways to support what comes easily to you, you'll have a far greater impact than trying to correct things that are never going to be as easy for you. So it was a really refreshing take. I think it flipped a lot of those tests upside down. And for us, it's not even so much the results as much as it is the conversation that it sparked on our team, and just the awareness of everyone's different strengths and how everyone prefers to communicate. I think that we now have a greater awareness of all the different personalities on our team, and it allows us to more strategically work together.
I think it's interesting, the whole philosophy of StrengthsFinder is based on this idea that focusing on your weaknesses helps prevent failure. Focusing on your strengths actually helps promote growth. And I thought that was a very subtle but very important distinction between how we're typically trained, how we're typically we typically progress through our career. Is we are good at something, and it allows us to get recognition. And then as we want to climb that corporate ladder, you have to go and, find a way to be able to correct any of the weaknesses that you have. You get down to that discussion of individual contributor versus management track. I know we've talked about it several times here on the podcast, but really that idea that, your best employees, you have to have a growth outlet for them that doesn't necessarily require management. Management is a skill. It is a strength. It's a strength that not everyone possesses. And somebody may be an outstanding individual contributor, but if you hamper his or her growth potential based on requiring them to go into a management role, which is not their strength, you're not able to leverage your team. So I think there's the philosophy of focusing on those strengths, focusing on your natural talents, and putting yourself in a position not only to use those talents, but really to be the person that can be relied on when those talents and those strengths are required.
I want to go a little bit deeper on this topic of individual team growth, because I think it seems like as managers, you can see the whole team and help the whole team grow. But Brett, I like this point about how you really have to plan for individual team growth. And Allie, what approach have you found to be most effective with keeping up with each individual on your team as the team grows skills wise, but also grows number wise? Do you like to do one-on-ones? Do you do daily quick check-ins, quarterly meetings? How do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of all of those things. So on a new hire's very first day at Knucklepuck, we do an orientation meeting in which we set goals and we have a really candid discussion about what they're looking for out of this job, what their expectations are of management, et cetera, so that we can all start from day one on the same page. We follow up this meeting with quarterly check-ins where we say, okay, how are you doing on these goals? Are we making progress? Are you getting close to hitting them? Are there things we need to adjust so that we can help you reach them? This is a great time to share additional feedback on what they're doing well and where there's opportunity to improve. And by checking in on a quarterly basis, it just allows for no surprises at the end of the year when there's a review. And I forgot that those were the goals that I set for myself. We're checking in every quarter and making sure that we're all staying aligned on what we hope to achieve. And it's really rewarding to be able to see people hit their goals and hit them ahead of schedule and see how they're so fulfilled in that. And we're really fortunate that we have employees who are self-motivated and driven by that type of improvement. So that's really what we do in terms of like larger career goals and your role in the company. But really on more of a day-to-day ongoing basis, I have weekly touch bases, which we call TBs. For new hires, they're on a weekly basis. And for more of our senior folks, they're on a bi-weekly basis. And these TBs are really just short check-ins where we can chat about how things are going with clients, how they're doing, where they may need more help, what's sinking in, what they need more training on. It ensures that we keep an open dialogue and provides a private forum for them to share their thoughts and feedback, which has really been valuable for me to help stay in the loop with all of their different needs. And everyone does have different needs. Everyone's an individual. And I'm starting to learn, more and more quickly what motivates different people as a result of these ongoing meetings.
And I think that idea of it being a private forum is really the key here. I'm not involved in any of these discussions because it allows Allie to be able to create relationships where you can have candid discussions, where you can discuss things that are going well, things that aren't, things that you feel that you're excelling at or where you think that there are weaknesses. It creates an atmosphere that is not just conducive, but really very open to and engaging with people to be able to provide feedback. There have to be distinctions, especially as you set up a management structure. There have to be distinctions between where people fill a particular role on your team. And I think that's really pretty fascinating to talk about this idea of having something that, and you've worked on, changing the structure of these discussions to be more efficient, because they can become a runaway train on your time. If you're just spending all your time talking about what we want to do, we're not actually going out there and doing it. That's been a past agency experience that all of us have shared, but being able to focus on how do we make this something that is tangible and beneficial to each person on the team and create not just a relationship of openness and communication, but also establishing benchmarks and being able to check in and against those benchmarks. We talk about KPIs all the time for our project. Every person says, oh yeah, no, that's a great idea. We should set KPIs before we start the project so we know whether or not we're being successful. Sounds like that's really what you're doing here with trying to establish these goals that people have, checking in with them on a regular basis to see where we are relative to their goals and their stated objectives. And having those benchmarks is essential to know whether or not you are succeeding.
Yeah, and we try to make these goals as concrete as possible. So if your goal is, I want to get better at public speaking, we'll say, okay, we want you to speak at 2 local events. It could be at a local university where you're sitting in on a marketing class. It could be at a networking event or a digital event after work. But your goal for the year is to put 2 presentations together and deliver them so that it is a concrete yes or no. It can't be something that's fluffy where we say, you kind of hit that. We try to be as data driven in our goals as we can, the same way we are with our client projects.
All right. Well, I want to take a step back. I hate that phrase, but take a step back to what Brett, you brought up a second ago about meetings. And at every agency, at every company, meetings is one of those necessary evils. And Allie, I'm really curious to hear, as director, you sort of get to set the tone, get to set the rules, the etiquette for the department. How do you find balance between the costs of interruptions that meetings cause and the huge benefits that they bring with that in-person collaboration? And how do you parlay that into actual projects and making sure that you're actually getting the stuff done in the projects that need to get done and not just meeting about it over and over?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked about this, Nate, because it's something that we're actively working on improving. When we first started and there was only 1 other person on the team, and then 2, and then 3, it was easy to have these meetings and it didn't interfere as much with our productivity. Now that we're up to 5 people, under me on the SEO team, it started to really chip into my time. So we've been working on ways to make our meetings more efficient, but still keep that open dialogue that we've been talking about there because we think it has a lot of value. So we're starting to add a lot more structure to these TB meetings that I mentioned earlier. We're asking the team to send a brief agenda, ideally the day before, or at least, the morning of, so that we can make sure we stay on track and cut these down to about 20 minutes each. So it really is just a brief check-in. And the goal is not to create more work for the team in that they have to put this agenda together. It's really just a short bulleted list of topics they want to cover. But it gives me a heads up about what they want to discuss so I can prepare and make these chats more efficient. And then if I see anything on the agenda that I think warrants a longer discussion or even maybe a working session where we work through a certain deliverable together, we'll schedule that accordingly for a separate time. We're also lining up these meetings so that they're back to back. And I'm trying to look at my schedule, and I'm not a morning person. So I actually get the majority of my work done towards the end of the day as emails start to die down and people start to trickle out of the office. So I'm trying to schedule these in the morning when I feel like I'm actually least productive. So that way I can take a time that's typically not super productive for me and turn it into something valuable. And then by putting them back to back, we're hoping that will prevent them from spilling over beyond their time.
Kind of comes back to the idea with the strengths finder where you see how do you play to your strengths rather than trying to say, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to force myself to be productive in the morning. I think that's a great way to kind of sum this up, where people who aren't a morning person, trying to get them to be a morning person, that's me. I am not a morning person at all. I kind of have had to force myself to be, because if I worked the 4 to 8 p.m. is my most productive time if I had everything my way. But if I worked 4 to 8 p.m., I would see my wife for 6 hours a week, and I would not have a very good work-life balance. So for me, it's something that I've tried to find the balance there and make compromises and sacrifices where I can, but playing to the strengths of knowing that I'm not going to be productive here if I'm sitting in front of my computer. What are there other things that I need to do that I can start to get done in that time? I think that's a kind of a very concrete example of being able to look at the ways that you are most efficient and say, let me structure my workday around those strengths. Let me structure my team dynamic around those strengths and how they complement one another.
Also, I love how you mentioned that you make meetings 20 minutes. So one thing that I see in not just past companies, but in a lot of other companies that I observe is that they go with the default. Google Calendar makes the default 30 minutes. I think is just like you're going to customize your workday around your exact strengths. I think it's essential to customize meetings and emails around the way your team actually works. And I love that. Just that one little thing I think highlights a lot about your overall culture, which is one of the last topics that I wanted to cover with you was culture. And you mentioned you guys have 5 people, but you're rapidly growing. And like you mentioned before, there's a lot of things that you can do with 1 or 2 people that change as you grow. And could you talk a little bit about how you're going about building and maintaining the culture that you have in the startup as you continue to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a leader in a startup, I really think that the team looks to you as a guide for the culture, how Brett and I interact, what types of behaviors we reward, how we communicate with the team and with each other and with our clients. All of these things, I believe, really have a profound impact on how the culture is shaped. And I think that the hiring process is also really crucial. We aim to hire people who have similar values and are just people we want to work with and want to spend our time with. We'd rather hire someone with no SEO experience who has hustle and seems like a great complement to our team who we can train and is willing to learn versus hiring for the exact skills and compromising on a cultural fit. That's really not something that we're willing to do because we're at the size where every employee is a really crucial component in building this culture. So we're not willing to make any sacrifices there. I think also as the other teams start to grow, so I mentioned SEO is growing, we're also growing our content marketing team. We're also growing our web development team. So we do things like when new hires start, everyone is encouraged to grab coffee or grab lunch with that person during their first 2 weeks so they don't feel like they don't know who to go get food with or what's in the area, so that they have already a time where they can get to know them outside of the office and ask more, personal questions in addition to just, where did you come from before this job? And I think also we use Slack as our means of, instant messaging day to day. And we have a lunch channel where everyone says, hey, like, what do you guys feel like for lunch today? And everyone is really involved. It's the whole entire channel CC'd there. So we're trying to, not prevent clicks from forming. We interact with the content team just as we would with the SEO team, just as we would with the development team. We're not really siloed by our different product lines.
And I think one of the other things that's important here that I know that I've seen you push, especially a lot more recently, has to do with making sure that we don't, as much as you don't want to get into cliques with the relationships you have, you don't want to get pigeonholed and saying, I'm the content writer, or I'm the SEO, or I'm the developer. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you kind of bring these separate teams together? Because as you kind of talked about with your in-house experience, if SEO is just one element of the overall marketing project. And it's one of the things that I know we're trying to build at Knucklepuck is to be able to cover as many of the arms as possible. But how do you take, your leadership, your direct leadership over the SEO team and actually translate that into leadership over the other departments as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing is we included them in all of our SEO trainings. We wanted them to know what we're talking about. We have an open office layout so they can hear us talking all day. And we want them to have the context for the types of requests that they're getting so they can see how it fits into the larger piece of strategy and vice versa. We want to be included in their trainings so that I can know what tools they're using on a daily basis. Maybe I can learn from that. Maybe I can apply it to my work. I think that one of my favorite things that we do here at Knucklepuck is our weekly download meeting, which we have every Friday at 10 a.m., where it's the entire team and everyone is encouraged to contribute to the agenda and you're able to share anything you found that week that you thought was interesting, maybe a new tool or Chrome extension that you came across, maybe something that went really well for a client that you want to share, or something that didn't go really well for a client and you learned a lesson and you want to prevent that from happening again for someone else. And it's a totally open forum where anything goes. And it includes the entire company, all of the different departments. And I think that is a great place for us to all catch up at the end of the week and see, what did you guys work on this week? And it keeps us all in the loop, and it prevents the silos like I've been talking about, because really everyone is included.
I love that. Well, I want to wrap up with a segment that we haven't done in a while, but I really like it. Our rapid fire tips segment.
Yeah, we need to get back to this. This was one of our more popular segments, and I think we got away from it. So we gotta make sure that we get these back together.
I know it's like the too long didn't listen segment, but
right.
Yeah. But Allie, I want to hear if you had someone they're responsible for managing a digital marketing team, what are your top 3 to 5 things that you would recommend to them?
Okay, so I'll give this a shot. I would set clear expectations and guidelines, but then give your team autonomy to complete the tasks. So I don't enjoy micromanaging. I don't think anyone really enjoys being micromanaged, but you also don't want to give people too much free rein, or else they can stray too far from the task or objective. So I try to set really, really clear expectations in writing if possible, and then give them the freedom to go complete the task however they see fit. And sometimes I learn a lot because they approach it from a different angle than maybe I would have taken myself. So that would be number 1. My second recommendation would be to set aside dedicated time to chat about industry changes. So in digital, it's so easy to get distracted by new tools, new case studies. I think shiny object syndrome is a productivity killer, and it's far too common, especially with SEO. So by saving all these discussions for our 1-hour meeting on Fridays, our weekly download, it gives our team an outlet to share these things without being distracted throughout the week by a bunch of different emails and news stories that everyone just couldn't wait to share. So try to have those discussions, but bucket them into a time once a week so that it doesn't kill your team's productivity all week long. And then my last tip would be to give lots of praise in public and give your critiques in private. Be honest and candid with your feedback. It will only help them grow and improve sooner. And I think everyone wants to hear honest feedback, but just know what is the right setting to share that in. So those are my 3 rapid fire tips. I hope they help.
No, and I think the one thing that I'm seeing consistent across all of those is it has to be an investment in not just appreciating the strengths and the skills that each individual brings to your team, but also putting them in a position where they can really amplify those skills. You talk about giving praise in public, critiques in private to help grow your team. Setting aside dedicated time to fend off shiny object syndrome, but also to make sure that people have a chance to broaden their understanding helps grow and improve that team. And then setting those clear expectations and benchmarks, affording people the autonomy to know that we brought you on for a reason. We don't want you to be here to simply repeat what I would have told you. We want you to actually push us to get better. We want to hire people smarter than us so that they can help us improve, but also to recognize how using all of these, complementary skills together really does turn the team into more than the sum of its parts. So I wanted to thank Allie for being on the podcast this afternoon. Allie, can you let our listeners know where they can reach out and get in touch with you if they have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am fairly active on Twitter at Allie Brown 89. And you can also reach me by email at abrown@knucklepuckmedia.com if you're interested in working with us or interested in maybe joining our team.
All right. Well, thank you, Allie. You can find all the show notes in addition to previous episodes and our contact information at bamboochalupa.com. A huge thank you to Allie Brown for coming on today. Be sure to go follow her on Twitter at AllieBrown89 and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Also, please go subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And while you're there subscribing, also leave a comment and rating while you're there. We not only learned a lot from your feedback, but your ratings helps others to discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thank you for listening.